So guys, this is how Guardiola used positional play, in particular the 5 lanes, whilst at Bayern Munich. So the first question is for people that maybe haven't, or they've seen this before but haven't really got an understanding of how it gets used. You know, why are there 5 lanes? I mean, first of all, what you've got to say is, okay, we look at the pitch going upwards and we then say, okay, this is lane 1, lane 2, lane 3, lane 4, lane 5. Okay, or they're also known as the 2 wide zones, 2 half spaces, and then the central zone. Now, why are there 5 lanes? The first kind of theory really is from an attacking point of view. When you look at a back four, a traditional back four, which, you know, typically most teams play, it's then how do we attack that back four? And if you look at what spaces you can exploit using the width of the pitch, you can see now you've got spaces in between those 4 defenders. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the problem with that, if you say, right, let's just look at targeting those five spaces, is when teams go very kind of compact as a back line. Okay, we just do it there. You can't really attack those lanes. It's not really a good reference point. So the reference point is always then the full width of the pitch, and then you extend it. Now, if you had 5 equal sides, 5 equal size lanes, the challenge is it's a bit unfair perhaps on the middle lanes where there's usually more players in there. You think about 3 versus 3 in midfield, or, you know, a box versus a box, for example. So actually this zone here just got made a little bit bigger, the central lane. That made these 2 half spaces even smaller, but also they were perhaps seen as the most dangerous ways of trying to break through into that final third. So that's the reason why there's 5 lanes. Now let's have a look at how Guardiola set up his team using the shape. Okay, so here's the setup. So as you can see, sort of a traditional 4-1-4-1, 4-3-3, however you want to word it. With the Bayern Munich team, obviously in Pep's time there, they played so many different players in different positions. You know, even if you just kind of go off of a generic team of Neuer, Alaba, Dante, Boateng, Philip Lahm, let's just say, Alonso, Thiago and Müller, Lewandowski leading the line, and then Robin and Ribéry as the 2 wide players. So that would have been probably on paper one of their strongest lineups during his time, even though perhaps the wingers weren't always consistent at playing together, and you'd have people like Douglas Costa, Kingsley Coman and guys like that coming in. But the first thing you notice when you look about those 5 lanes and you think about structurally, hopefully you can see it. The first thing that you'd notice is, and we talk about positional play, it's all about holding a certain zone on the pitch and holding a certain position on the pitch. And this could be whilst in build-up, it could be in the attacking phase, it could also be obviously positionally out of possession as well. But in terms of just a simple basic stance here that we're going to look at, and we'll go into more detail around build-up on another video, and on attacking play on another video. But the rule of thumb really is, can you try and ensure that you've got a minimum of 2 outfield players in each lane at all times? So the ball might be here with the left back, but you've still got your two players out on the lane 5, which means that you've got the full width of the pitch. And one of the basic concepts with any coach or any coaching session is, can you have width and can you have depth? Okay. So the rule of thumb for the players is, can we try and get 2 in each? As you can see, your centre back and your 10, your single pivot and your striker, and the same all the way through. Now that might obviously change throughout the game. It's not going to be always completely structured like that. You know, for example, this player might end up in this zone when that player's on the ball here as the left back, and you might have a situation like that. Okay, it's going to happen. But in terms of just getting the structure right, and especially when the ball maybe starts with a goalkeeper or it starts with a centre half, that's your sort of basic structure. And you can't really build anything in a game tactically in possession without having that structure. If your structure's a bit sort of all over the place. There's no real guidance. There's no real understanding of how to play. Now, there is another concept around relational play where, you know, you're looking to create overloads on one side of the pitch and try and combine and play through, but that's still a structure, okay? But this is obviously the positional structure that Guardiola used at Bayern Munich. Now, again, one of the rule of thumbs might be, okay, if the winger moves inside, it might be the 10 recognises that, and how do they then go and get on the outside? You know, it might be the striker drops in and comes to get the ball feet in here. How does the 10 look to go beyond in that moment? So there's how you kind of get your rotations within that. Traditionally, what would happen with the centre-backs is you'd have a striker probably split in the two, okay, and his job is to make sure that he can't play around the other side of the pitch. So that leaves then the space for the centre-back to then step in, okay, and that might be a case there where he goes in quite far and the single pivot player drops in, and it might be he can take the ball inside and so on. It could be that the fullback tucks round and the winger drops in, or the 10 drops in. You know, so there's plenty of flexibility within the structure, but having the structure first is important. Now, the challenge that I think, especially in wide areas, traditional rotations give you. So if you think about Guardiola's time at Barcelona and David Alaba at Bayern Munich before and Philipp Lahm before, traditionally these guys would go quite high and go beyond, like a traditional fullback. And maybe the winger would move inside, and it would be that kind of nice wide triangle rotation. Now, the problem with that, if you think about it from the defensive point of view, so I'm just going to put these guys in here now. Okay, so if the 11 decide, if this is Ribery and he decides to go inside the pitch, the 2 can track him quite easily. If the 10 looks to drop down, the 8 can track him. And if the 3 looks to go beyond, you're asking your 7 to do a bit of work. But again, it's quite simple in terms of following. So you might move the opposition players, but you're not going to disrupt the opponent structurally, especially in this kind of build-up zone. So what Guardiola kind of worked out quite quickly was, what's his biggest strengths in his lineup? It's probably these 2. Robin and Ribery. Now, what do they need? They don't need to be going and getting the ball in these pockets in the midfield, because that's where it's most crowded. What they need is they need space and the ability to go 1v1 with opponents and try and get into the final third. And then they've got an absolute poacher and finisher in Lewandowski. So that was pretty much what his whole build-up and then attacking game plan was at Bayern Munich, is how to give these guys 1v1 opportunities whilst maintaining the width across the 5 lanes. So the way he did it, and it was revolutionary really at the time, but it has been done before in football just many, many years ago, is when the ball might be with the centre-backs, instead of saying to the left-back go wide, it was go and play next to your pivot in midfield. And he'd even say the same to Philipp Lahm. So now what you create is a 2 versus 1, okay, which is more than enough. And then you've got an overload in midfield where you've got your 2 fullbacks joining your pivot player. Of course, if he had to, you know, if they played 2 up front, he could easily drop between and make a 3, okay, or maybe the fullback can slide behind and then he plays as a 2 in there, so it's a 3 and a 2, okay, but typically teams wouldn't play a front 2. So now, coming back to this situation, for this winger, he's got a bit of an issue here. So as the centre-back, if he goes in there and he stays wide, then he can obviously turn and he can look to drive in and try and find three players higher up the pitch, okay. If the winger does go inside, it's now created this option here for the wide player just to drop in and get the ball straight away, and you've got an instant 1v1, and we're talking this is Ribery, or the other side it's Robin, and that's like perfect. So then you've then got a situation where the opponent probably ended up just dropping in and being really defence minded on this side. So even in your build-up play, you don't even have to worry about that pass. These guys can go and just play higher up. Everyone can go and play 10, 15 yards higher up the pitch. Okay. And you get into the build up, into the attack phase very, very quickly. Now, because the 3 and the 2 are positioned quite high in midfield now, it frees up these guys to go even higher. So now your 8 and your 10 can go and push up the pitch. So now you've got your width higher up the pitch. You've got your striker giving you the depth. and that these guys become part of that front line. So it very much becomes a 2 at the back with a 3 in midfield, and then of course your front 5. Okay, and we'll talk about on another video why would you use that front 5 using the 5 lanes, how you would use this kind of defensive structure now in possession to obviously defend counter-attacks, but also to circulate the ball and find opportunities to get maybe 2v1, 1v1 out wide with bodies arriving in the box.